Hello from Houston. It's Roger D with Texas Tea, where I bring on hustlers, entrepreneurs, and prodigies, where they spill the drama-free tea on what makes them successful. Today's guest, man, this is a special one, guys. He has had over 1 million downloads on his own podcast. If you watch his videos, it will be the reason your podcast goes from good to world class. And honestly, with what he's doing right now, he's going to take Houston and make it the podcast capital of the world. Ozeal DeBastos. How you doing, brother?
Man, killer intro, man. That's how you introduce. That's probably the best intro, seriously,
really,
that I've gotten in quite some time.
That's what. Hey, you're the man, the legend that allows me to say such an intro.
Oh man, thank you, brother.
You're
thank
welcome,
you. It's
man.
good to be here, man. Quite the setup. I really like it. This looks like a pro setup.
Oh,
We
thanks,
got the
man.
cameras here. We got Gonzalo in the house.
I was gonna say,
hooking it up, and
all the equipment in the world would be absolutely useless if we don't have the magician.
Gotta show him some love, man.
Always,
Without
man.
him, this this can't sound like a
I'm
pro.
just a talking head without Gonzalo. just an idiot with a microphone. But hey, man, yeah, thanks for coming on, Ozeal. Obviously, a fan of what you're doing in the Houston community, podcast Houston. If someone's listening that is thinking about starting a podcast, obviously they're having some doubts and there's like 850,000 podcasts. How am I going to compete? Aside from you giving them the kick in that butt to start, what would be some initial advice that you would give one of our listeners?
Deciding why you're starting a podcast.
Oh.
I think the podcasts that thrive and that take it to the next level are the ones that are fueled by purpose, along with passion for the subject. And if you are somebody who wants to humanize and have a passion for education, for informing, for entertaining the crowd, I think podcasting is an opportunity for us all. And that's the thing that I love about podcasting. So when people ask me, how do I get started? I'll say, wait, why do you want to start the podcast? Not because it's a fad or an in thing to do, but because you are super passionate about the subject. Because at the end of the day, they call it pod fading. They say that people quit podcasting after 7 episodes.
Wow.
They fade away. That's a true word, by the way, a pod fading. They fade away. And the ones that stick it through are the ones that are really passionate and understand why they want to start that podcast and really build from there.
Yeah, dude, it's not easy, man, especially when you put a lot of time in and you get like 32 views or 32 listens or downloads. It's I can understand that. Why do you think 7, by the way? Is there any idea?
For some, it's
Lucky
funny.
number 7.
They did like a research, man, and they figured out that 7 episodes is where people capped out.
Yeah.
And not sure why, but that's where it's at. And they say that 7 is the number. So
That's
if you're past 7, man, so you're
What
beyond that
this
pod
is,
fading.
37.
37, man, in
37.
the game, bro.
There's a 7 in there.
It's
Yeah,
this,
we're getting there. I'm just looking for the centennial. I'm actually super excited to bring on Oscar of the famed Salazar brothers, who's famed Salazar brother. I always say that. He owns Mornings Kolaches.
Okay.
And he was the first to agree, one of my customers for Eastwood. So I was very excited. Props to Oscar. Thanks, Oscar, for being the reason I started this.
There you go.
I remember I had not to go on a tangent because this is about you, for sure. But
it's your show, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing that I would throw out there is you don't need good equipment to start. I had a $15 stand for my iPhone, and I had like $20 lapels, and that was it. I spent $35 because I had no idea what was I doing. And you know what? If you listen to that episode and you listen now, it sounds great now, but it's not that insanely different. Like you have to have the ear for it, I feel like.
Yeah. And now look at that. Now you have Shure SM7Bs and professional microphones. And you brought up a good point, Roger, because that's one of the things that hold people back from starting a podcast is a lot of people that start a podcast. Many of us didn't go to broadcasting school, right? Number one. So we are very uncomfortable speaking into a microphone, how to conduct an interview, and pretty much how to use our voice, right? And then you have the techie part, where I wish we all had the brain of Gonzalo, where we knew all the tech part, but a lot of us don't. So that could be very daunting and can be very discouraging for anybody interested in starting a podcast. So those are some mental hurdles that when I coach people through in the beginning stages, it's the mind game, and the mindset is the game. And that's something that really prevents people from really sharing their voice through a podcast is the tech. And what you just said is a perfect example of someone who gives himself permission to just say, hey, listen, I don't have much. I have a pod. So a podcast is essentially a microphone, a laptop, desktop, and a hosting company. That's it, right? And you record it, converts it into MP3, you put it in a hosting company, and then voila, it's all over the world by a click of a button. That's it. That's a podcast. So start with, what you got, and then you can always evolve. And then after you build those reps, you can always upgrade to a professional microphone.
And I know now, at least for me, and I still use it, Anchor.fm makes everything super easy if you don't want to go through all those other steps. Actually, just as kind of sidestep, what do you think about Anchor?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of the pro podcasters that have been doing it for quite some time. I've been podcasting for over 7 years now. And
Lucky 7.
7 years. Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. But I'm still going strong, man. No pod fading here. So Anchor is a great platform for anybody who wants to taste podcasting for the first time. It's your mobile phone, you download the app, and voila, you have a podcast, right? You start creating content, you get it out there. But I'm a big believer of owning your own podcast platform. So I think it's a great way to start podcasting. However, if you're serious about podcasting and really building a brand and building brand authority, I always advise host it on your website. Host it in your RSS feed, because your RSS feed is your, to use an analogy, your own radio tower, and you own that. So there was an issue with a podcaster who got very political. He got super political, and iTunes decided to yank him out, along with Anchor.fm, right? But because he owned his own RSS feed, they couldn't unplug him from his website. So his listeners had access to him directly to listen to that podcast. So with Anchor.fm, they have a lot. Actually, Spotify bought them out. And they did. Yeah, Spotify's been making some major moves.
Now it makes sense why Spotify is the top one when you go to link.
That's right. Yeah, they're taking over. However, recently, iHeartRadio is another big player in the podcasting game that is making some serious moves in the podcasting world.
Which they're local Houston, right?
Yeah. So Anchor, going back to the question, great place to start. But if you're serious about podcasting, I would advise to think about hosting it on your website where people have access, where they can really get to know you, sign up for your email list and really build that connection with your audience.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because Anchor is so easy to use. That's how I started.
Super easy.
But I was thinking as I was actually signing up for the Amazon one today because I saw a post in your group that reminded me I gotta go on Amazon. And then I thought to myself when I had to put in the RSS feed from Anchor, I was like, man, I probably should independently host this. Now we're to a point where there's no reason I'm not doing it.
Yeah. No, I think it's Amazon, and there's so many distributing companies that are coming out. It seems like every week that are opportunities for podcasters to distribute their content. Libsyn is a hosting company, and now they give you access to listenership in India. And apparently India has a major podcast listenership. So it's gone global, and that's the beauty about podcasting is that unlike Clear Channel and some of these radio networks, it's very kind of based on local or national. But with podcasting, with the click of a button, you're global. You're in people's earbuds all over the world. I think that's the thing that's really intriguing about this world of podcasting.
Yeah, that is super cool. Man. I know seeing the statistics from Anchor, and I'll see like someone from India or someone from Venezuela. And I'm like, oh, man, that's kind of crazy. Yeah. Who would have known, right? Who would have known?
Yeah, I have a funny story. So when I had, within 2 years of No Permission Needed, I stopped podcasting for about 3-4 weeks. Got super busy, decided to take a break. By the way, anybody who's watching this and hearing this, stay consistent. That matters, especially if you launch a podcast. And I launched a podcast. Anyways, I was in the trenches, and I stopped podcasting for a few weeks, and I was like, well, nobody cares. And somebody emailed me and said, hey, where in the F is your podcast? Like literally that was his email. It was a listener from Norway who I had never heard from before, and said, "Hey, listen, I'm a big fan of the podcast. Gives me a lot of, I really appreciate the interviews, your style, and what happened to your podcast, man? I've been looking forward to it."
Yeah.
So that day, I was just like, man, it motivated me so much, Roger, that I was like, okay, never again will I drop the ball. I'm going to stay consistent and continue podcasting because people are listening. So even though you don't get that instant gratification, because it's a faceless community, right? It's kind of you and the mic, and we don't know who's watching or who's listening, right? We don't know where the views are coming from or who's listening. We just know where. But people are plugged in and people are listening, and you don't know how much of an impact you're making on someone's life until you kind of back away from it, and then they email you with that, like, where in the hell is where is your podcast? But anyways, podcasting matters, man, and that's the beauty about that as well, is that it does make a powerful impact on people's lives.
Yeah. If we wouldn't get negative feedback from that would be a great shirt.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. But that's really cool, man, that you had that kind of cut of time, and it was clear that you were making that impact. And I think that's super cool to think of. I think it's too egotistical to think, hey, I'm going to make a podcast, I'm going to change the world.
Right.
But I think if you think, hey, I'm going to do this, if I enjoy it, and maybe if a few people enjoy it too and get something out of it, that's cool. I think that's the way a lot of people should go at it.
Absolutely. Yeah. In the beginning, here's a great tip for podcasters. I would put in a sticky note, like, who my listener is. I would do like my avatar, somebody who is my listener, like that one person. So No Permission Needed, my podcast was centered around creative entrepreneurs. So helping creatives go from struggling artists to thriving artists. So I would always keep in mind when I would interview that person is the person that I want to make sure that I'm conveying that message to. So
and what made you take a break from No Permission Needed?
Yeah, I went on hiatus because I made a pivot in my life where I was podcasting. I'm always been passionate about teaching people about podcasting and just education. So I made a pivot because I wanted to teach people how they can launch their own podcasts. So I went towards the educational route and started building community. So I built a community centered around podcasting, launched Pod Houston a couple years ago, and all my energy went into the educational component of podcasting. So I missed it. I'm going to be launching a new podcast in 2021. Super excited about that because I miss being behind the microphone and just like seeing you. Like, this is so much fun, man. We can do this and get paid to do it. And it's possible.
Yeah.
This is the gig for me. But right now I've been focusing on community building, educating others and informing others about the powers of podcasting and building from there. So it's been fun.
That's what's up. Educating on what's needed to get done to be successful seems to be a theme.
Yeah, man, I think it's important. I think there's, obviously Google and YouTube University out there where you can get this information, but I think there's something about learning from podcasters that have been doing it for quite some time. There's a lot of people that are jumping into the space and like, yo, I know how to start a podcast and I'm a pro, but I think it's good to have people like myself and other people in this space that have been, OGs, so to speak, that have been doing it for quite some time, that can help people who've been podcasting for a year or two and say, hey, listen, these are the things, these are the common mistakes, these are the things that we can do to tweak where you can become a world-class podcaster, and just giving people results, and taking hobbyists and really turn it into like a business if they want to.
Yeah, and I think you are probably... I would assume that you're drawing from how you're taking someone who's a creative, right? That's completely different than business, and putting in the tactical factors. And this is the same thing here. This is collaborative, creative, and then you got to make it into a structure, because if you're not structured, you're going to fall.
100%. You hit it right there, man. Podcasting has been known as kind of like a hobbyist, right? Even the broadcasters were laughing when podcasting came out, because they were like, oh, these are just people that are just kind of getting on the internet and calling themselves, a broadcaster and calling themselves podcasters. So there was a lot of mockery and a lot of people that did not take podcasting serious. But now the pros are here. NPRs, ESPNs, Howard Stern, and these are the big pros that are coming. Celebrities are starting podcasts. And now what NPR and some of the big dogs have shown us as independent podcasters is the structure. Like, if you really have a structure behind your voice, you can really turn it into a business model. So I think that's the thing that intrigues me most, Roger, is that For me, when I started, it was simply just a mic and speaking my truth. I just want to go ahead and have these conversations. But now I've learned from the NPRs and some of these big dogs that there's a business model that we can implement within our podcast to really take it to the next level. And that's been really exciting for me as an independent podcaster and as a teacher.
Yeah, yeah. And that's from a standpoint of building a podcast to turn into a business. I also know that you with Ozeal Media, you're looking at it also from the reverse, where you have a successful business. How can that be related into a podcast to bring value to their customers?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that's important. And I think even cutting my teeth as a business owner really helped me understand the podcasting platform from a different perspective, which has been super valuable to others. Yeah.
So let's say I'm a business then. I'm ABC Properties Incorporated.
All right.
Looking at all these buildings over here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, you know what? Leases are about space and area and price and so on and so forth. I feel like I'm getting commoditized. What would you say they could do as just for this example, commercial real estate? What could they do as a podcast that would set them out differently?
Yeah. Here's the thing. Podcasting is a media channel for people to get information. And I will say this, anybody who's watching, listening, the ones that are taking the time to educate, to inform, and to share their message from within are the ones that are going to win, period. Right? So I believe community, information, connection is the new currency. And if the brands and businesses that understand that if I'm a practitioner or that business owner and I'm educating a potential client, or I'm simply bringing a conversation where I'm debunking myths, or I'm educating you on energy or on real estate, if you become that person, you automatically start cultivating a sense of connection with the new audience to say, hey, if I'm trying to get into real estate, I'm trying to buy a home, listen to this podcast or listen to this practitioner, because they have taken time to show up consistently and help me get educated in this space. So I think it's a great opportunity for businesses to start saying, how can we build a bridge between us and a potential customer, a potential client, and I think that's powerful, man. And look at podcasting as a conversation, not just as a transaction. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of businesses now are trying to get into podcasting, because they were like, well, we want to go in and use it strictly as marketing. But that's not the point of podcasting. Podcasting is to build relationships and to humanize your message. Yeah. See, people don't want blogs and videos and, hey, guys, buy this. And all that is dying out. What people want is real, authentic humans sharing, educating, and taking the time to create a medium, right, a podcast, to be able to give back to the people without asking for anything. And I think that's where we're at now. And the ones who get it, again, they're the ones going to win.
I completely agree there. I think you can see the appetite that consumers have for podcasts early on with reality TV, because they wanted to try to see things that were genuine. Like, it was a joke because reality TV wasn't really genuine, so on and so forth. But I think that was probably one of the first markers that people wanted something other than just completely structured out. Yeah. They want to listen to a conversation. People want twists and turns that they don't see coming, and that type of twist and turn is easily replicatable in a normal conversation, because there's no structure. There's no structure to a conversation. There's no, okay, the hero comes up, they have a huge challenge, the challenge kind of beats them down, they come back, and then they save the the damsel in distress. There's no movie-like structure to a conversation. I think that's why people like it. I'm not really sure.
Well, something that people get from podcasting, that's a great point, Roger, because what people love about podcasting is that once again, it gives you the real, it's raw. That's why when people start podcasts, they get caught up with, Ozeal will always ask me, like, I need to, edit all the uhs and ums and make it perfect. I'm like, no. There's radio for that. Let them go for radio. That's a whole different world, Reality, right? We call it reality radio. It's podcasting. It's just you being real, and people love the idea of listening to the brand authority or the host and let them be real. If let them, the imperfections are embraced in podcasting. And I think that's another intriguing thing about podcasting that people love.
Speaking of the host, by the way, I really feel like, no, not of me, but in general, being a good host, I think you want to kind of be less of the podcast than your guests if you have guests on there. Obviously, if you're doing it by yourself or with someone else on a normal basis, you are the whole podcast. But I started to think about more and more, and I'm probably actually talking more than normal because obviously this is a passion of mine. 20%, 80%. I try to go with that.
Okay.
I should be talking 20% of the time. You should be talking 80% of the time. I don't know if that's a good rule of thumb. Am I thinking of that wrong?
No, I love that. I think it's important to note that when you have a show, your guest should be the rock star.
Yeah.
Your guest, you're bringing on the show because there's something that you admire, appreciate about the guest. Yeah. And I love the idea of having a conversational podcast. I've always been a big fan of the conversational style interviews for radio. But I think that, I think there should be a good balance. But yeah, of course, I think at the end of the day, it should be, I love your rule there, the 80-20 rule. I think it should be, the guest being able to share.
Yeah.
But although, I love the way you do a great job of implementing your ideas and sharing your own point of view, which people want to hear. This is your show, and I think you do a great job balancing both. But yeah, I'm with you on that, man.
And speaking of giving my point of view and opinion, I feel like I should only interject either if I can make some sort of analogy or bridge that I feel like might be important, or add something that I'm knowledgeable on. What I'm not going to do is just say, oh yeah, this, that, and the other, and bring in my experience that has nothing to do with the situation. Yeah. And
that's one of the things that a lot of podcasters make a mistake on when they interview, is that they feel like they need to interject. I need to interject and say something every single time. And sometimes there's beauty in just the art of the pause, and just pause and let it land, and then go ahead and follow up in the conversation.
Speaking of long tirades of the guest talking, have you seen the Kanye West?
With Joe I have not seen it yet, man. Is it out?
It is.
Okay.
It's good. It's good. For anyone listening, if you haven't watched, I don't watch. I actually try to watch as much as I can. I'm trying to watch more local Houston podcasts.
Okay.
For obvious reasons, right? Give back to the community. Joe's probably the only person I listen to because I don't have a lot of time, and I was like, okay, I know his quality. But I haven't listened to him a lot. Man, Kanye is definitely a creative mind, man. He's just an absolute genius.
He is. I think he's definitely a genius. I know some of his antics get overshadowed for him being such a genius, but no, he's definitely a brilliant mind. He's a brilliant businessman, and he's definitely a creative. On all regards. Yeah. So let me ask you this: why Joe Rogan? Why do you listen to Joe Rogan? What's the fascination?
When did it start? I'm trying to think of when it started. I don't listen to Joe Rogan so much for him.
Okay.
He's a really good host. He just has such a bevy of different talent on there. So
more for the guests because
I know I'm not looking for all these interviews with Kanye. I just know Kanye on Joe Rogan is going to get the max out of Kanye. So if I wanted to see the max out of a guest, and I think that's probably a good lesson to learn there.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is because there is a reason why Joe Rogan has really taken off with his podcast. And I believe when I listen to Joe Rogan and watch him, he's a killer host. Mm-hmm. For anybody who is launching a podcast, take a moment and learn from the pros. Watch David Letterman, Larry King, one of my favorites, Howard Stern, Joe Rogan. Listen to the way they conduct the interview, not to mimic them, but to be able to see how they flow in conversation. Like Roger, you're a fantastic interviewer. Like you're awesome.
Trying me.
And no, absolutely, no, you're doing. So you're a great host. And I think part of it is relaxing and really understanding that it's a conversation. I remember when I would go out to social places and I would find myself let's say at a bar. And I just didn't know how to talk to somebody. I was like, Ozeal, come on, man, you have a podcast. Like, turn it on. Literally, I would turn on like my podcast host hat. I would put it on, and I was like having this amazing conversation. Next thing you know, the person's like, dude, that was a really great conversation. So podcasting really, what people really don't know, Roger, is that podcasting helps you become a better conversationalist. Like it becomes, it makes you feel more comfortable. It helps you articulate your message better, clear, and it makes you a better communicator and a better listener. So when you watch people like Joe Rogan conduct a great interview, it's because they're really interested, right? They're not interesting, but they're interested in their guests, and they really are listening, and they're really kind of having this dance back and forth between them and the listener and the guest. And I think that's something that I'm always intrigued by people's answer when it comes to Joe Rogan, because people love him, man. And when I listen to him, I see why people, you know, are intrigued by his style, the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's something for all podcasters to take away.
Thanks for those kind words, by the way, Ozeal. I definitely didn't start this way. I know it might seem like I flow pretty well.
Great, man.
By the way, one quick pin before I kind of go off on that. Yeah, dude, I'm telling you, I realize now that when I go out in the field, because I don't go out socially as much as I'd like to anymore, but when I go out in the field with agents and we're talking to customers, I go into exactly podcast mode.
Yeah.
I'm just like, ask the question and I'm listening. And then I'm listening to my agent to see like what they're doing. And like, it's crazy how podcasting has allowed me to become even more present in the moment. And really that's all that life is about. It's about being present in the current moment. But to not sidestep for what I was going to say before, and I'll just try to keep this pretty summarized. I'm always trying to get better. Joe made me realize that I needed to stop saying, yeah, yeah. I was doing that a lot in the beginning. And I was also what I was doing a lot. I was like, okay, how can I get all the value I can out of my guests? They have so much value. So I'm trying to think about pre-recorded questions. They don't flow well. If you look at some of my earlier stuff, it's like that. It's pretty bad like that. Another thing was I would carry my day over with me into the podcast. I was in the middle of some stuff. You came in. I was still had that in the back of my head. I sat down and you were like, I had all your attention and it clicked and I was like, all right, fucking get to the podcast, Roger. That shit can wait. Whereas in the past, I would have that in the back of my head and I'd be like, yeah. And then I'd be like, fuck, what did they say? And then I was like, oh, what's my next question? So just a few points there is try to not say verbal cues as you're listening, unless it's really like, oh, you know. Number two, and now I'm like, oh, hijacking. I'm sorry.
No, you're good, man. You're flowing.
Number two is be present. Really listen. I think that's a huge thing. And number three, don't worry about what you ask. What's the worst that can happen? You bring them on another time. If you didn't get what you wanted, you bring them on another time, or her on another time. So yeah, I'm sure you'll be for sure a continued guest, Ozeal. I can't imagine.
Oh man, thank you, brother. No, this is awesome.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on, because I feel like I've already knew you before you came on, because I was watching your videos. And for those who haven't looked up his YouTube channel yet, we'll dab it up over there. Is the YouTube under Ozeal Media?
So it's under Podcast Influence.
Oh, okay,
Podcast Influence is the YouTube channel.
Got you.
I release a new video every Thursday, giving tips, insights, and strategies. And it's really about helping independent podcasters pro up and really become great world-class podcasters.
Yeah, and I've already learned that I broke one of his rules already. I forgot that one thing. But there's a key thing that I learned from Ozeal, is that be prepared with all the ways to connect with your guests.
Yeah.
So that was a huge thing. But those simple things I didn't even think of. And I think it's really important to have someone in any sense. I have a mentor for business. I have a mentor for energy brokering. It's always important to have someone who's seen that. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Who taught you?
Ooh, great question. Oh, man. So who taught me? Well, prior to podcasting, I was watching a lot of video cast. Even back then, there was a podcast called rise to the top in mixergy. Yes.
What's the difference between podcasting and videocast? Other than the obvious, is there something I'm missing?
Right. No. So podcast is audio, man.
Yeah.
I mean, podcast is strictly audio. What we're seeing now, the future of podcasting, one of the things that I'm seeing as a trending thing, and we're going to see growing, is simulcasting it. And a lot of very much like what you do.
Yeah, what we're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
What we're doing here. Texas T,
Simulcast.
yeah. So you're doing an audio format, and that's the podcast, and you're also putting it on YouTube, and that's the video. So simulcasting it.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot of podcasters now gravitate towards video because, I mean, let's face it, video matters. People love the visual effects. When I watch Joe Rogan, I really don't listen to the podcast. I actually go watch him on YouTube.
It's the opposite for me.
Really, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah? Okay, so you listen on audio. But see, look, I mean, so you're consuming his content differently than I am, but he's being consumed because I want to be honest with you, like even I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan, but for some reason there's something about watching him on YouTube that I just like watching. I don't know if I could watch it on or listen to on audio.
I'll make a quite change there. I watch it on YouTube, but I'm just listening. Because then every now and then I'll go look at him real quick. Be like, oh, hey, Joe.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
Yeah. But because I'm not even subscribed. It's just I'm always doing something else.
Yeah.
But anyways, keep going. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
No. So I think you're going to see a lot more video and podcasting being grouped up together, coupled, because it's the future. And I think there's something really cool about having like a video show. And then having the audio for the audio consumers.
Question for you, by the way, and I'm sorry that I'm trying to pull out as much
No, go
free,
for it. Let's
free
go,
stuff
man.
out of
This
you.
is good. No, man, this is good stuff.
We have very white walls.
Yeah.
I feel like that's Gonzalez laughing. This is something we've been trying to figure out because, like, I can't really do anything because this is for Eastwood. But we thought about potentially bringing like a chalkboard behind both of us with the name and stuff like that. That's a thought. What would you say to make my simulcast, the video cast portion, more appealing?
Yeah. We didn't go Joe Rogan style, do like the whole Star Trek and all,
Yeah,
like
that was
right,
so
yeah.
weird. What did you think of that? By
You
the
know
way?
what? So I actually liked the first rendition. Remember when it first came out, they posted a picture on Instagram and it was kind of like, it was the wood.
Okay,
It was.
yeah.
I actually like that a lot more. I just think that dark aesthetic doesn't look good. It just doesn't feel.
Doesn't feel
Joe
Rogan.
Rogan. It just doesn't feel right. Even like visually, it doesn't do anything for me. And a lot of people have complained about it. It's just too dark.
I'm sure he'll change it if enough, or he doesn't care.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, right. But I think, going back to the question is just, I think making it, branded, colors, adding maybe like a backdrop of, the Texas T brand.
Right.
But yeah, actually adding some color, whether it's like even a painting, just to add some sort of
Yeah, we were
aesthetic,
thinking
not keep
something.
it busy, but keep it simple
We were
and something that kind of embodies the Texas T vibe, the brand.
We were thinking like two green, the green chalkboards from when we were kids?
Yeah.
Putting two roll green chalkboards and having like your name with some like,
There you go. Yeah.
really bad stick art.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
fun, That's
Yeah.
something that'd be kind of cool when we can, like, the guests can draw something and write. Make it their
exactly.
own.
And then also,
It's cool.
Per your recommendation, have all the social stuff up right
Yes.
behind him too.
Boom.
That'd be
That's
cool
it.
Too.
That's
So
it.
we gotta
Note
get
it.
some
You got that? You got that, Gonzalo?
So we thought, because we're way over budget already, we've just figured we'd break into like HISD and just steal some. So then
why
it would
not?
make it authentic.
Yeah, there you go. Why not?
Yeah, why
I
not?
like that.
Theft. No, I'm kidding, guys. Don't do any theft. Yeah. Anyways, I don't know how we got on the background there.
Back to somebody knock and be like, "Yo, man, I got some chalkboards for HISD,
I know, right?
man."
Yeah. Just somehow they
You
have
inspired
it in
me.
a coat. Like, how did you? They're extendable.
Right.
So back to simulcasting,
Yes.
video casting.
Yeah,
so,
man.
I know you're saying that it's kind of becoming more of an important thing to have the video cast, but what would you tell someone who doesn't have the equipment or is camera shy or, but they still want the YouTube situation? What should they do there?
Yeah.
Puppets? No, I'm kidding.
I know, right? Yeah. There's people who do that as well. So start with audio in the beginning. Get your cadence, get your reps in. Get comfortable with being behind the microphone. I would say live stream. And I know live stream can be daunting because that's just kind of like really like vulnerability to the max, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the imperfections, everybody's watching it live. But I think you can do that, you know, with setting up a phone, go live stream, maybe keep it at private. And you can kind of post edit later. I mean, if you're really worried about somebody watching you live.
Yeah.
But it takes some time. You know, one of the things that I learned, Roger, is I've been podcasting for so many years. And prior to this, I was a musician. I was in a hip hop funk jazz group. So I spent a lot of my life in my early 20s being a hip hop MC. So I was in front of massive crowds, you know, opening up for a lot of national acts. So the microphone was normal to me, right? So this was like an easy layup, right? Podcasting. Because I always wanted to be like an MTV VJ and just wanted to, interview people. So this was easy. But when I started that YouTube channel, which is relatively new, I started Podcast Influence about 3 months ago.
Great.
Yeah.
Great build up.
Yeah. So it's been, So it's new. But it was so daunting for me. And I was like, what is happening with me? I've been in front of the stage, in front of people. I've been podcasting for 7 years. Why am I so freaking nervous? Like, what's happening to me? And being in front of video, bro, like there's something about staring at that red light that just bugs you out. And you're just makes you feel uncomfortable. And it kind of like takes away your energy. That's what they say when you're in front of the camera, you got to 10x your energy because it sucks it right out because you're like, how do I act? Am I looking funny? You know? So anybody, going back to your question, if somebody's interested in simulcasting it, start audio, get comfortable, get confident, live stream it. And then once start practicing with live streaming. I started live streaming for the first time this year. During COVID. And it really helped me get over the video scare because I was afraid of video, bro. Like I was afraid of video. So this
crazy.
Podcast Influence YouTube channel, it was like a huge leap of like and really overcoming a major fear of mine. So I've never mentioned that before, but I'm still kind of weird when it comes to video because it's uncomfortable for me, man. Yeah,
that was never a huge thing for me, except for I realized when I started, I was like, I'm in good shape. And then COVID happened. And I was like, oh man, I got to make sure I'm in okay shape again. Because I'm
just
definitely
get me from here up, man.
Right? Ghazal, can you just cut out some fat around the face?
Photoshop me, man, cut this out. Yeah, I hear you, bro. Yeah, I mean, because, the video doesn't lie, right? You get to see it all, bro. Yeah. And it's just kind of like you get very subconscious, and you get to see all the quirks that, people have on video. So, it could be daunting. So, again, just practice.
I noticed I do a quirk, and I mentioned this to Gonzalo. For some reason, when I'm thinking, I turn this.
Oh, yeah, you get real fidgety? Is that what you do?
That's my thing. I've been trying not to do that. But,
you're doing good, man.
Thank you. One random thing, by the way, saying that you're in kind of the MC hip hop space. Is that where you met Jim?
Yes. So I remember Jim. Shout out to Jim Narvios.
Hey, if you're in Stafford, vote Jim.
That's right. That's right. Give a little
vote
plug.
Jim. Stafford strong. Anyways, keep going.
Right. What's up, Jim? So I met Jim. He came up to me at a bar in Houston. I remember it was called Poison Girl here in the Montrose area. Yeah. Okay. And he came up to me and he was like, "Yo, Ozeal, I'm a big fan of your music. I really, I've been to your show, etc." And he was like, "Yeah, man, you want to go 16? You have 16 bars, and I'll give you my 16 bars." And then I was like, yeah, sure, man, go ahead. And he just started rapping. And
nice.
And I always appreciate that about Jim. It's just he's been one of those creatives and individuals that is always giving, super talented, super creative, and now who has a podcast now as well. So I'm proud. I've been helping him out with his podcast.
Saw that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I saw him get the Shure mic. I was like, oh, okay, I see you.
Yeah. I said I told him I have messages like, yo, man, you're pro, bro. Like quick, And he's like, because he's been putting it aside for quite some time, and now with everything that he's doing, I said, dude, this is the time for you to start a podcast. Get your voice out there. You're great at voice. You've been speaking. You've been doing music. Get it out there. So I'm so proud of him.
Yeah.
So
I hope Jim isn't too upset with me. I wanted to give more time to the campaign, and I hope at least what we've talked about has helped a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely,
but,
man.
Dude, I don't know if you've been down in Stafford. I've driven by his truck one time while I was out in Missouri City with an agent, and man, it's something else. I'm so excited for him to become mayor, and I can't wait for him to be on the show.
Man, listen, knowing Jim from the music days, And I'm pretty sure anybody who just, if you know somebody who's really ambitious, everybody knows that one ambitious
That's
person.
him, man.
And I've known him as an independent musician. To see him do speaking and engagements, become like a motivational speaker, doing theme songs for the city. And then now he comes out of the woodworks and he's like, yeah, I'm running for mayor. I'm like,
Yeah.
what's happening here,
Well,
man? So respect, man. I think he's super ambitious.
Oh yeah, super passionate too. And I know not to go into the gym show all of a sudden now, but I think one of the biggest, it seems like, objections to him being in there is that he doesn't have the experience. But I'd have to counter with that. Well, he has experience with a lot of people and a lot of people in different cultures. And also, he didn't know how to campaign. He didn't understand this. He didn't know how to podcast. But you know what? He sat down, figured it out, and gave it his all. And that's exactly what he's going to do as mayor. And I feel like that was a really good plug for him.
Great plug, and also a great transition and analogy for no permission needed, giving people permission.
Exactly.
That sometimes even us as independent podcasters, who I'm not sure about you, but I didn't go to formal broadcasting school, and I gave myself permission to say, I'm going to buy myself a microphone and interview people and create a show. And hopefully people will enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I think it's the mindset for a lot of podcasters that are jumping into this space saying, you know what, I'm really passionate about Netflix documentaries or Cobra Kai. I actually had a friend of mine who actually had started a podcast.
That's
Cobra
awesome.
Skyrocketed.
I bet.
Amazing listenership. Bitcoin and whatever it is. And then just start things that you're passionate about. And a lot of them, they don't have, broadcasting background, but they gave themselves permission to say, I don't know all of this, but I know what's in my heart, and I just want to speak my truth, and I just want to start this thing. So that is a true example right there, a real example of somebody who just said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and get myself permission to run for mayor. Don't know all the, the rules or whatever, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Much like podcasters, give yourself permission, give yourself the courage, and, give yourself props to start something, and, forget what everybody else is going to say. Just do it.
Oh yeah. If everyone stopped themselves from doing something because they felt like they didn't have the experience, we would be still living in the Stone Age. Yeah. That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
You're saying that you had someone that did Cobra Kai and that skyrocketed, or do something that was Netflix documentaries. I think a really good thing to do is go niche. But let's say you have a podcast that covers a lot of different topics, but is, Joe Rogan isn't obviously not niche. How would you, or what advice would you give to someone who's got a broad spectrum podcast?
Come on, man.
To make it more niche or make it more attractive to a very specific audience?
Oh man. Now you're talking my language, because this is what I love.
Yeah.
This is a common challenge, a common question that I get from a lot of people jumping into the podcasting space. The riches is in the niches. All right?
I love that.
The riches is in the niches, baby. And if you want to start a podcast, you have to niche it down. No Permission Needed was an entrepreneurial podcast. Somebody asked me this not too long ago, would you start an entrepreneur podcast right now in 2020? Absolutely not. Because there are a ton out there. So instead, if there's a topic of, let's say, entrepreneurship, how about entrepreneurship interviews with Gen Xers or creative entrepreneurs that are over 40? Like, really start figuring out where is the angle where I can be different. Millennial entrepreneurs, right? Mompreneurs, dadpreneurs. Get very specific, and that's what 2020 and moving forward, you got to niche it down. That's the reason why things like Bitcoin and Cobra Kai and these little specific niches, Stranger Things podcasts, and are booming, because they're very niche, and people are gravitating towards that now more than ever. So going back to what you were asking, what would you do differently, and how can we, if you have a broad spectrum of topics, if you want to figure out, if you want to throw spaghetti on the wall and figure out what moves you, then go ahead, keep it broad, right? But there's something in there that you have to be able to bridge the gap between your passion, what you're proficient about, right? What are you proficient in, right? So let's say I'm really good at selling energy, or I'm really good at judo or breakdancing, okay? And then I couple that with passion, and then I look at profit. So it's passion, profit, proficiency. And if I can marry that in the middle, you have a business podcast right there, man. And I think that's something to keep in mind. So hopefully that answers your question. Niche it down as much as you can, man. I think you have to be able to do that now in 2020 moving forward. Does that answer your question?
No, it does answer my question. And it was a veiled question so I could get information for myself.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to think of how I can make Texas tea more niche. I know Gonzalo and I have been kind of throwing that around. I thought maybe just making it, it's only Texas, which is niche, but Texas is a big state.
Right.
Houston area, I could bring it down to there.
Yeah.
But then I felt like I can make it more just brick and mortar businesses. But like at the same time, like I like the openness. I love the state of Texas.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of tough. It's tough. So I don't know what to do.
I think the future in your case, I think Texas, Houston, I think that's a niche, man.
Yeah.
And I think what you're doing, I think local is the future. All right, point blank. Let me put that out there. If you're starting a podcast, you're going to see a big boom in specific cities booming. I was actually talking to a buddy of mine and it's called Queen City, Charlotte. It's a Charlotte, North Carolina, Charlotte, the city of Charlotte. They started a bunch of localized podcasts that are crushing it, man. Why? Because they're localized, they're niched. And I think we're going to start seeing more big cities launching podcasts that are niche within business, energy, coffee, breweries, Houston breweries or Houston Coffee House podcast. You're going to start seeing more of that. And those are the ones that not only have business opportunities, but have great targeted listenership opportunities as well to grow quick.
Yeah. I think NPR was doing that too, weren't they?
Yes, I read an article about that they were trying to launch different initiatives in different cities. And it's smart because they understand that if we become a tour guide and we give people focused audio content related to specific cities, it's a thing. It's a thing. And I think the ones that could do it and be creative with it, there's a huge market for independent podcasters like ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm going to have to think on that. I feel like I really got a good groove, but we are based in Houston. And then the Houston area is still pretty big. Yeah. But then I have to change my name. What about Space City Talks or Speaks?
Space City, yeah.
Space City Speaks.
Yeah. I always say, look, here's the thing, and this is a great tip for you and anybody who's watching and listening to this. If you want to, so I have an acronym that I use, and it's BAM.
BAM.
Like BAM.
Okay.
BAM. Brand, audience, monetize. In that order. If you do that in that order, you will have a world-class podcast. Brand, you build the brand, right? Texas Tea, right? We gotta tweak the brand. What does Texas Tea mean? Is it if it's literal? If it's a stranger watching it, then I may not know what Texas Tea is. That it's actually a business podcast. Yeah. So a tagline has to tell me. So if the name of the podcast doesn't tell me what it is, right? A Cobra Kai podcast tells me it's about Cobra Kai, right? No permission needed is very abstract, but the tagline is empowering creative entrepreneurs. Like it's letting me know that it's for me. Yeah. So brand, you build an audience, and then you can go and ask for money. Advertisers will be attracted to that once they do that. So if you do that in that order, a lot of people who jump into podcasts, they don't even lock their brand down. And then they're like, well, I'm not building my audience. And I always say it's two things. You're not putting enough reps. Or it's
I feel like that's a big one.
But it's either marketing or your branding. And I look at either or. I'm like, well, you're not marketing and your brand is off. Like, I don't understand what the podcast is about. Well, it's about for nurses. And I'm like, there's nothing nursing about, that's related to this. And that's a big issue with a lot of podcasters. So my advice is take some time, nail down the brand, survey people and say, hey, listen, when you see this logo, if you see this name, what do you think of? And if they don't say business, then, or if they don't say what the niche you're trying to convey or the topic that you're trying to discuss, then you have a branding issue. Then you have to go back to the drawing board and figure out, do I need to change out the tagline? Is the logo, is the name of the podcast off? So we got to start thinking about that way before you start thinking about monetizing and building an audience.
So you either have to have a name that is super clear.
Yes.
Or a name, if a name isn't super clear, the tagline has to be even more on point.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. Yeah. If the name is abstract, you got to tell me in the tagline. And there's some names, like a buddy of mine has a podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire. He uses the keyword entrepreneur on fire. So now I know if I'm an entrepreneur, that's my podcast.
That's podcast.
Okay. So you have the Solopreneur Hour, another podcast, a buddy of mine. I know it's a solopreneur for solopreneur. It's for me.
Yeah.
But if you keep it abstract, people are not going to know what it is. So that's super important. Man.
What have you seen for abstract ones that have a good tagline, aside from yours, of course?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me see if there's you put me on the spot here, man, for some abstract ones. Well, I mean, for example, for mine, it's not a sexy tagline, but it's no permission needed. So it really doesn't tell you nothing about creative entrepreneurship. Yeah. But in the tagline, I say empowering creative entrepreneurship. Yeah. Right? Creative entrepreneurship talk.
Yeah.
So that's an example of how no permission needed says nothing about what I'm trying to talk about. It's more of a declaration. It's a mantra, right? No permission needed. But empowering creatives.
Got you.
Now I know it's for me. So that's just an example.
Got you. I'm sure there's definitely a number of them in your group that you can help out.
I'm sure. Yeah. Oh, I know. And that's something I'm really big, which is the reason why, Roger, that I started Pod Houston Insider, which is a podcast mastermind.
Yeah.
Because I want podcasters, if you're going to invest a lot of time and energy into this microphone, into everything, into marketing, you got to make sure that you have your brand down. And the majority of podcasters that I see that are having podcasts out there, their brand is way off. And I want to see them succeed, man. And I think it's important to hire either a consultant or somebody who's been in the game for quite some time to say, hey, listen, yo, man, I love your passion, but your brand is off. You know?
So not to call anyone out, but what example can you give of a brand is way off situation?
An example? Oh, my God.
It's going to be tough not to call anyone out.
Let me see. Somebody in Pod Houston. No, I'm not going to do that.
Oh,
no. They're going to be like, what? I'm not joining this group anymore. Yeah. I'm out.
See, Gonzalo, remember when I was like spending multiple hours trying to figure out the brand? I wasn't that crazy. I'm still crazy.
No, listen, it takes time. And what I did with my podcast, and I always tell my clients, is have sticky notes. Like say, okay, what is a single message that you want to share with your podcast? What do you want people to get out of your podcast? And I will get sticky notes, bro. And I would actually write down inspiration, motivation. And I would just do all these feelings and emotions, and then I would use names that were tailored towards my niche, and I would do sticky notes and just figure out, putting names together, and then it would kind of help me kind of figure out, filter out what I want to get out, and that's where I came up with some names.
Yeah. I think it's really
it's a process.
Yeah, it's definitely a process, and I think it's really tough to nail something down, especially when you want to. If you're having guests on, I think it probably limits you a little bit if your niche isn't super big, because how many guests are you going to get in there? If you're by yourself, you can be as niche as possible as long as you can be considered an expert on it. Or not even an expert, a curious individual on it. And just go from there. Yeah. Bringing up topics or what have you.
Yeah. And I will say this, Roger, for our listeners and people watching this, it's okay. I know we're harping on branding, but it's okay to evolve. It's okay to pivot. I always say, in a year, right? I believe in message over metrics. I've been preaching that for years. Focus on your message. Don't even worry about the metrics. Don't worry about the download numbers for the first year when you launch a podcast. Focus on making sure that you're delivering great content. You're in the game, right? 37 episodes, right? This is 37. So just don't focus on get 50, 100, and then you can figure out, okay, where do I need to pivot? Where are some tweaks I need to make? Or you can even, start making some tweaks even throughout the journey, throughout the process. So you can always evolve, man. A brand evolves.
I think this is actually 38 now that I'm thinking
38? Okay, okay. So you passed the 37.
Yeah, we had a weird, because I was just thinking, I had to think about it for a second, and it kind of, I think, plays into the consistency and the hurdles. We had someone come on that the mic was not positioned well. And we ended up having the sound is not going to be the quality that we always want. Right. But we wanted to put it out. It actually happens to be someone who did a Halloween fan movie. Halloween the movie. Okay. They made a fan version of it. I forget what the term is. Not fan version. Fan flick, I think. Fan flick? Does that sound right? Yeah. Anyways, so I was like, I'll look it up. And we're like, damn, this is not where we want the sound to be. So we kept going back and forth on it. We were just gonna retape it and have JP come back on, and we were like, well, let's just fix it and get it out there. So we have this one from way back that we're just gonna input in there, and maybe it will get nothing. Maybe it'll be great, but the fact of the matter is, like, we have something that's actually Halloween based that we can put on the 31st.
Yeah. Okay.
So stuff like that. But yeah, it's hard not to get just put off by situations like that, and I think that's one of the biggest thing. And for me, even I, a legend. No, I'm kidding. no. Even I, who have like a lot of self confidence, I get to the point where I'm like, why am I doing this? Well, I figured it out once I asked myself that question. But for people who are just getting out there, I know you said in the very beginning of this podcast, it's passion. You got to have a good why. But there's going to be dark times. I'm sure you've had them. What got you out of those dark times?
Yeah, man. Well, content creating burnout is real.
Yep.
Especially when you're consistent and you're delivering the goods and you start creating, setting these metrics and expectations, and you feel like you're not meeting them, or just period, you just start getting burned out, just like anything else. One of the things that I look at is just going back to if I find myself feeling like I'm losing motivation, I take some time just to figure out, okay, what's the end goal here? And I think asking yourself, what is the end goal? Okay, if I'm really enjoying these conversations, that's awesome. Then it's just fun and it's just self-satisfaction, right? But what is the end goal? So if you have a business goal with a podcast, start thinking about, I always go back and be like, okay, cool, that's the goal that I want to attain, but that keeps me focused, man, and really kind of being motivated that there's sometimes I go to my hosting company, even now, like, right? So the podcast's been on hiatus. I go and I'm still getting, 500,000, downloads per episode. And it's pretty awesome if the podcast is on pause and I'm still getting downloads.
Yeah.
So it goes to show that it's still resonating. And that, for some reason, that motivates me, man, knowing that people are listening. I always say if one of the things that I do or suggest for podcasters is that if you feel that you burn out quickly, start a seasonal podcast. Hey, listen, I'm going to release 12 episodes, take a break, and then release 12 more, and then do seasons, kind of like a Netflix special.
Yeah,
it also helps you out in avoiding that burnout.
I always wondered what it meant to have like seasons, because I'm just like, when on Anchor, it shows that you can do seasons. I was like, why would you ever have seasons? But that makes complete sense.
Some people do. And they have, people are running businesses and they just don't have a lot of time, or they just want time to regroup, to avoid that burnout and regroup so they can get more guests, or they can go back and tweak the brand, tweak a few things, on the back end, and then they come back at it, harder than before. So I think it's okay to take seasons. If you find yourself kind of getting burned out, I think taking a little break, and reassessing why you're doing it is important for sure.
And I'll add one thing that I found that's good for me too, is this is an age old adage where love the process, right? I found that Cole, actually, who you met before, we say this all the time. Who has the balls to do that? If you put something out and be like, who had the balls to do that? Me, like, get excited for what you put out for yourself, and be happy and love it for yourself. And that clearly isn't going to work out if you keep getting one view every time. You should probably be like, okay, what can I do better?
Right.
You want to look at it later, but you should be proud of what you do just for yourself.
Right.
I think that's a big thing too.
And that's the same problem, Roger, and I'm glad you mentioned that's the same problem that a lot of business owners, when they come up to me and say, Ozeal, we want to start a podcast, but I'm like, okay, that's great. And we'll get into kind of the creative briefing. And then one of the questions that come up is, what's the ROI? Can you guarantee me results? Can you guarantee me downloads? Like, I want to be Joe Rogan style in 6 months. Like, can you guarantee? If not, then I'll drop you 10K, 20K. And I'm like, there's no guarantee, man. There's no guaranteed. If this podcast is, if you put in a lot of hard work into it and people sense that you're passionate about educating, entertaining, informing, and they feel you and you're showing up consistently and you're building that connection, the results come by you showing up. but I can't guarantee you those download numbers. And I think it's important to keep in mind, it goes back to the why, right? I really enjoy having these conversations. So I'm going to show up because I really want to meet cool people. And there's something about kind of like having, you know, new people, right? You're meeting, your network is building, right?
Of course.
I mean, with podcasting, what people don't realize is that your network builds, right? Podcasting is a great network opportunity. You know, because of podcasts, I've been able to interview some of the most brilliant minds in marketing. You know, the Shark Tanks and Seth Godin's and the big dogs, because I had a podcast show.
That's awesome.
And podcasting is one half building network, and then the other half, and I'm talking with my hands. I flow. It's my rapper
No,
right
I
here.
got you.
The other one is, you know, you're building influence. And you're building legacy, because you can go back and you and Gonzalo could go back maybe, you know, 20, 30 years from now and be like, man, we did that, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, our voice is timeless. Like, people can go back and listen to the stuff that we did.
Mm-hmm.
One of my biggest regret as an independent musician is that I didn't document enough. I didn't record a lot of the great music my band and I did. We were so busy doing live shows that we didn't document the process. Well, now with podcasting, you're literally documenting your voice. Imagine if we had voice recordings of Benjamin Franklin, of Abe Lincoln, of all these brilliant minds, if they documented their voice. Well, now with podcasting, we're literally documenting our legacy, and it's powerful. And I think if any business owner or just individual who's passionate about their subject or their topic is understands that they're building legacy and they're really giving back to the world, like they truly are, you're making an impact on the world. If you go with it, that's always going to be your why. I think that should be enough to stay motivated and continue enjoying the process and moving forward.
Yeah,
you know, I get fired up on that, man.
Yeah, you're passionate, man. That's a good point too that you make about documenting. I think if someone trying to transition their podcast, the media, into putting it out on social platforms, I think it's cool to have clips. By the way, like that's super awesome to put it out there in social. But I've been thinking about the fact that, hey, I'm sure everyone kind of wants to see the behind the scenes. That's the thing now, behind the scenes too.
Right.
So that's an interesting thing. I don't want to go too into that because I have no idea what to do about it yet.
About what, behind the scenes?
Yeah. I think there's some stuff there though that you can help people get more interactive with your podcast, right?
Yeah, I think as a content creator, right? As content creators, we need to get more creative in how can we just give them more than just an interview.
Yeah.
You know, I think would have been cool if we would have got even a snippet of you like catching people, guests, while they're coming into the office, setting up, like Gonzalo say, hey, listen, and catching the behind the scenes as we're setting up, jabbing away, all that stuff, content building up to the interview.
Right.
People love that content. So that behind the scenes exclusive content that people could either grab on social media, or you can put it part of the YouTube, like, you know, this is the behind the scenes clip, you know, before the interview rather. People like that stuff, man. And just, I think finding creative ways to do that, I think is going to be a big one moving forward.
And I think, granted, TikTok doesn't get banned. I feel like that could be a good situation to get it up on there too. Once you get a following on there, for sure. There was like one other thing. Oh, I was going to ask, because you were talking about the businesses wanting a specific ROI. You're talking about, you know, them wanting to kind of speed that up. And I noticed that's a very big hurdle for anyone trying to sell any marketing services to a business. How is this going to affect me right now? So I know you give them the preface, and you already said that, you know, they got to be patient and so on and so forth. What's kind of the hook that you kind of bring them in where they're like, they have that aha moment? What's the kind of like, well, look, it's going to take time. I can't guarantee anything, but regardless, you're going to get this or whatever that is.
People are listening.
Yeah.
People are plugged in. I'm sorry. Facts.
Yeah.
Over 62% of Americans. And if you look at there's a reason why Spotify is investing millions of dollars, $1 billion.
Yeah.
iHeartRadio is investing heavy. Automobile industry is heavy into audio, right? Putting smart speakers. People are consuming audio because it's accessible. It's convenient. Podcasting to me is education and entertainment on wheels.
Nice.
You dig that? I mean, people are actually now, I can plug in and work out and do that. People love that. So I'm getting educated and being plugged in to the Texas Tea podcast while I'm working out. And I'm being informed and I'm getting to know a little bit more about your brand. And people are gravitating towards that. That's the reason why, speed is huge right now. That's the reason why Lyft and Uber took over the taxi industry. Was the model different? No, it was still, providing transportation. But they did it faster and quicker. Curbside, it's quicker. Podcast, audio content, it's quicker and it's easier and it's a human. So what I say to that person is, if you're a brand or a business, now is the time to humanize your message. People are plugged in. People are listening to podcasts now more than ever. And if you see the chart, Roger, it's like it's growing, bro. It's steadily growing and growing and growing, which is the reason why celebrities and big brands and Sephora and McDonald's and GE and brands that you wouldn't even think of starting a podcast are now in our space because they understand the power of voice. And once people are plugged into voice, people are finding access to it. It's going to continue to grow. So to that brand or business that's like, what's the RI, patient? I get it. No, man, you're losing a huge opportunity globally to give access and to build a connection to a consumer that's untapped, that's there, and to really build a true fan to your brand. And I think that's where we're at, man. I mean, connection and community is the new currency, as I said before. And if you're missing that mark, man, you're missing a huge opportunity.
Connection and community is a new currency.
Boom.
That's
it.
That's a good tagline, man. And you said one thing that's very, I think, interesting and important is that people are listening to it while they're working out, when they're driving. Radio, it's like we're coming full circle. And I feel like audio is so important now because people are trying to find more time to fit things in. Life is becoming more hectic, and the digital age is allowing for us to do more things with less time. And as we, grow and so on and so forth, we're having less time. Podcasts fit in perfectly. So guys, if you're thinking about opening a podcast, Ozeal is your guy. Or Zeal, if you just want to go with his rap term.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Zeal. Yeah.
But anyways, man, how can we find you? Kidding. So if you,
what?
yeah, right. Ozeal has a lot of ways you could find him. Think Ozeal, his personal brand, thinkozeal.com, at thinkozeal on Twitter and Instagram. Also use that same tag for Facebook. Also Pod Houston, which we talked about, of course, podhouston.com, at Pod Houston on Instagram, I believe. Facebook, not Twitter yet.
Not Twitter.
I think I actually looked it up. It was
That's
some weird, what?
Yeah, it's some weird.
It's like a Chinese.
Yeah.
situation
I saw
on
that.
there.
I was like, come on, man.
I know, right? And then Ozeal Media, because what better name for a media company than this badass name? Ozeal _ at Ozeal _ media for Instagram, Ozeal Media on Facebook. I want to say I'm missing something, but I think that's all of the amazing things you're doing.
All right, so two things. that was a professional conclusion. That's how you close out the show, ladies and gentlemen. So podcasters watching, listening, take note of that. And what I'm super impressed is that you did that without any notes, man. You're like Jay-Z of podcasting right now, man. You do it off the top.
Thanks.
So the fact that I was watching, I was like, is he going to have any notes? I have notes. Yeah. But the fact that you delivered a killer intro and delivered a killer outro just like that without any notes and just
Appreciate
flow.
that, man.
Bro, are you sure you're not a rapper? You got it, man.
I'm definitely not Jay-Z. Are you saying I'm like the ugliest podcast or what? No.
Beyonce, bro. That's all I got to say.
Dude,
Beyonce. Come on, man.
He's just really good at closing deals. But you know who I learned this from? Ozeal. That outro, his videos are amazing.
Thank you, man.
Podcast influence on YouTube if you're thinking about this. So, of course, you can find Texas Tea everywhere at TX Tea Podcast, Instagram at TXT Podcast, on TikTok soon. Of course, find us on Facebook, Texas Tea, in the YouTube comments, Texas Tea Podcast. I know you guys are going to have about 73 different questions for Ozeal. Just pop them down below.
Yeah.
He will be glad to answer them. If you guys can't get through us that way, we always take smoke signals as well. And this is Roger D with Texas T from Houston, and Ozeal and I are out, done for the day.
Hey, man.
See you on the next one,
Peace, guys.
Good to have you, brother.
Boom. That was
Thanks,
awesome.
man.